This video is titled Imprint Snapshots. In this video, we will cover how to use snapshots in order to create your own custom reports. To begin with, we'll go ahead and do our versioning by creating a copy of this mission and pasting that copy, and then we will update our description to reflect what's going on in this particular video. All right, we'll now go back to our network diagram. And as I mentioned, snapshots are a means to generate custom reports in Imprint. They're often used for capturing the values of variables within your model. So you've created your own custom variables that you're tracking through the model, and of course, Imprint's built-in reports aren't going to have any information about those variables. So if you need to get outputs regarding those variables, a snapshot is a good mechanism to do so. This is especially useful if you decide to create your own performance metrics in your model. So to create a snapshot, you're going to go to your analysis tree and you're going to find the Snapshots module, and you can right-click on this and select New Snapshot, and it will create a new snapshot called Snapshot. You can then double-click on that new snapshot to open up its Properties dialog box, and we can rename it. Note that the name cannot have any spaces. You can also see that you've got a snapshot information tab where you set the trigger type and the trigger criteria, and then you've got a snapshot variables tab where you establish the variables that are to be tracked. I'll tell you a little bit about this area first. There are several different trigger types. The clock trigger type is used when you want periodic measurements, and you can set when you want to start and stop that particular time. So if you have a particular time you want to stop, you can select that. Or if you want it to be periodic, so you want to have it take a snapshot or take a measurement every 10 seconds or every 30 seconds or every 1 minute, you can set that here. We've also got the begin task, and what this does is it takes a snapshot or measurement every time a particular task is begun. So you can go through here and figure out which task you would want to do that on and select that one. Right. You can then do an end of task in the same manner. So the difference between those is if you want to really capture the status of a variable before a task has begun versus after that activity has happened. And then we've also got the end of run. And so end of run means end of replication. So if you run your model through multiple replications, this would take a single measurement at the end of each of those replications. And you really use this when you want the final variable status, right? So we can have regular periodic measurements of a variable. We can have it happen associated with particular activities, or we can have it once at the end. In our particular scenario, the first snapshot we want to capture is that we want to log every time a PIN is authorized and whether or not that PIN was correctly entered. So I'm going to name this particular snapshot PIN authorizations with no spaces. And then for that snapshot info, I want that to be at the beginning of the authorization task. And so we've got beginning of task, and an authorized PIN is the particular task that I'm interested in. I can now go to the snapshot variables, and I can add a variable by selecting down here in the bottom right the add button. It immediately defaults to clock, which is the first variable in the list, and that's a default variable. Most times when you build your snapshots, it's nice to include the clock so you know at what time those activities are occurring. So I'll go ahead and keep that, and I'll add another one. This time I want to know if the PIN is correct. And I'm going to use the variable, and you can see that when I select the drop down here on the snapshot expression, it actually provides all of the variables that are available in our variable list. So I'll choose PIN correct. So what this will do is at the beginning of every time it does the authorized PIN task, it will give me the clock time and tell me whether or not we've got the correct pin. I also want to create another snapshot to capture how many entries were made for each transaction. So how many times did someone have to enter a pin before they were able to complete the transaction or were rejected by the system. So I'm going to go ahead and create another snapshot. And double click on that one. This one I'm going to call number of pin entries with no spaces. This is going to be at the end of the run. So a single run is just one person doing their activity. I'm going to do multiple replications so that I can capture the variability that can happen within the model to see how that varies across the model and across several different replications. And then I'm going to go to the snapshot variables, and I do want to go ahead and add the clock. It's always good to have. Adding the clock here is really just going to tell me what time that particular replication ended. So I'll know how much time that individual spent doing their transaction, and then I can also find out the number of times they had to enter their pin. So I'll name the field number of pin entries, and I'll use my number of pin entries variable for that. All right, so to view the results of these snapshots, I first need to run the model. So I'm going to go ahead and go to execution settings, and I'm going to say that I'm going to run this mission 100 times because I do want to capture that variability that can happen. And I will then run the model. All right. And then at that point, I will then go to the reports and the operations results. And you'll see that in addition to the built-in imprint reports, I now have a snapshots tab, and listed in that snapshots tab are all of the snapshots I've created. So I'll go ahead and mark both of those and say OK. And now I can open up the reports that it has generated, and you will see that I've got both of these here. The pin authorizations and the number of pin entries. So each snapshot was placed on its own tab. We can go through here on the pin entries and see that most of the time they're just entering a single pin. There are a few times when they had to enter the pin twice, and then there are some zeros as well. So 0 means that it was not a valid card. Right? And then on our pin authorizations, we can see here, this is for each time a pin was attempted to be authorized. We can see whether it was the correct pin or not. So in this video, we showed you how to use snapshots in order to create your own report utilizing the variables that you've created in your model.